They're contained by their executives and the producers and the people behind the scenes, and they only have so much leeway for opinion. We saw that with Tucker. Tucker ventured outside of that, and he had a podcast voice on network television. So you had a guy that was saying what he believed about the intelligence agencies, about the FBI's interference into the protests of the Capitol, about Pfizer and Moderna and what they've done with the drugs, about the lab leak, about Anthony Fauci, about all these different things. Like, he essentially was treating network television like a podcast, and with great success. The number one guy on TV.
That's right.
And they kicked him off.
Yep. That's right.
They kicked him off at the top of the heap, which is just madness.
So I got a question for you. So in regards to Tucker, we're not, professional psychoanalyzers, but we're just speculating and having a conversation. When you think about Tucker, what do you think his play is? Meaning, does Tucker come across as a guy to you that wants to be the next Rupert Murdoch billionaire? Do you say, I think this guy wants to be a billionaire? That's one. Two, do you get the vibe from Tucker? It's like, look, I just want to do a podcast, be left alone. I don't want to work for anybody. I want to do my own thing, and that's it. Or three, do you get the vibes from Tucker that Tucker wants to be a Netanyahu, a Churchill, a guy that is, a journalist that's been debating everybody, has been reading every issue for the last 20, 30 years. He went through the phase of Jon Stewart sitting there on Crossfire when he had a bow tie on trying to bully him, and then he comes out and crushes everybody. Tucker does. What do you think is his play? You think it's billions? You think it's just being left alone and let me live my life? Or you think it's actually maybe he wants to make a run for 2028?
Well, what he's doing is very profitable, right? Like, what he's doing, he makes a tremendous amount of money talking about things from his perspective. I think he's going to continue to do that. Whether or not he decides to become a politician, I don't know if he has any aspirations about that. Do you?
Do you ever know when somebody does?
Yeah, when someone's involved in politics in that extent where you're talking about it constantly and you know the insides and the outsides, you know all the bullshit and all the shenanigans. Yeah, I guess you would probably have at least an idea of how you would do it differently and better. And he's also got a very popular voice. Like, if he decided to run for president, like, say if Trump, let's just make a scenario, Trump wins in 2024. He has 4 years. If Tucker went to run in 2028, he could win. He really could win, because it would be kind of carrying those policies, but also he's a sort of a no-nonsense guy who exposes bullshit in a pretty humorous way, in a very insightful and biting way. And that's what he was really good at on his television show. And he red-pilled a lot of left-wing people. There's a lot of left-wing people during the pandemic that's like, Tucker Carlson's a propagandist and he's a piece of shit and is a right-wing asshole. And then as time went on, they're like, he's saying a lot of shit that's right. Like, why are they locking these tests? Why are they making kids wear masks? Like, is there any science to it? There's actually science that just came out recently that said wearing an N95 mask for more than an hour a day is actually bad for you.
What you were doing on the podcast space, he was doing on the mainstream space.
Yes.
Like, very interesting. Now, when you think about talent, I'm sure if Fox invites you and says, hey, Joe, we'd love to have you on a guest for a 10-minute segment like that, I'm not doing no 10-minute segment. It's probably not going to be your style to go on Newsmax or Fox or CNN to give a 5-minute answer that you give. America doesn't want that anymore, right? And a lot of these guys that have these TV shows, for them to go from there to doing a podcast, they think it's easy. It's not for everybody. You're used to reading a teleprompter. Hey, so earlier today at 6 p.m., Devin Archer did this, right? But Tucker is comfortable there.
Right.
When he did the Iowa event with the Blaze, and he's up there interviewing everybody, boom. He goes after ISA. So, now that you know everything that you know, did you take the COVID vaccine and how do you feel about the decision?
Right.
And he says, did you take any of the vaccine? No. Mike Pence, hey, so, now that you're this, what do you think about da-da-da-da-da? Well, I'm glad you're paying attention that I'm running. Yes, but how about this, right?
Yeah.
One by one by one by one. That is very scary. It's not a duplicatable skill set for a guy like him to do, Tucker. But the key is this guy going to get the itch? Because at the Turning Point USA event with Charlie Kirk, afterwards, I'm asking everybody, and I want to know who stole the show. You know, like at UFC fights, the guy get, hey, $50 bonus you're going to give. That's maybe it's not the main card, but it's someone that steals the show. Okay.
Right.
It was 60-40. Trump 60-40 Tucker.
Yeah.
So it's like Tucker's coming into, you know, but the part that he's not doing right now is, which I think is going to work in his favor, he's not going in there saying, I'm not running this time around. You know, he comes out and says in 2028, and imagine if let's just say Trump wins and he runs 2028 and Trump's endorsing him. I mean, he could be in office for 8 years.
He could. I think no one is going to run against Trump in the Republican side and win, because you're not going to get the Trump supporters. They are all in on Trump. Unless he has a stroke, unless something happens that's horrible, they're all in on Trump. If you run against Trump, you're now the enemy of Trump. If I was friends with DeSantis, I'd be like, don't do it. You can't beat that guy. You just can't. When that guy gets out there and he's waving to people and they're going crazy, you're not beating that. There's a fucking, and the fact that he was the president for 4 years and the country was in a great economic situation, and it looked like his policies were actually effective, and that it looked like the unemployment was down, all business was building, regulations were being relaxed, more things were getting done. You know, when you look at it from a policy perspective, if you just look at it on paper, what he did was effective. A lot of people think it was effective. You don't like him as a personality, so you ignore that. Don't do that. Look at it in terms of a policy perspective. People liked the ideas that he was putting forward. And now you're saying like, oh, the wall is raised. Now the fucking, everybody thinks there needs to be a wall. Even the mayor of New York City is now calling to stop immigration into his city. And this was the guy that called for it to be a sanctuary state. When the reality of what your policies, what kind of actions you put forth, what the results of that are, and those results are highly negative, you're forced to sort of recollect your thoughts and come up with a new perspective. And that's what the mayor of New York City is doing right now. When you just look at what Trump's policies were, and then obviously COVID hits, there's a lot to that, the lockdowns, the economic collapse, all the shit that came with that. None of that is good. And then Trump holds up this like hope to bring us back to where we were when he was in office.